I work for an organisation called the JISC, as you've heard of, the JISC Regional Support Centre in the South East. And I'd like to introduce, first of all, we have two sessions this morning in this room. And the first one is Helena Gaunt of Guildhall School of Music and Drama, who's going to present on the challenge of cultural change. The presentation will last for about 20 to 25 minutes, so can I ask you to keep any questions you've got until the end? And then we'll have a break, 5-10 minute break for questions, and then I'll hand over to Peter, and hopefully we'll have time for some questions and perhaps discussion at the very end. So the whole session goes on until about 12:30. Is that right? Sorry, 1 o'clock. I'm mad as soon as I said that. Goes on to 1 o'clock, and then we'll go for lunch after that. So thanks very much, Helen.
Great, thank you. Thanks very much. Well, it's a great pleasure to be here, and I am looking forward to this session, very much hoping that I'm going to get lots of useful thoughts from you all, because I think the first thing I should say is I am absolutely not a Moodle expert. And I'm probably very much someone who's typical in my own institution. We're a small and specialist institution. Our specialisms are music, drama and technical theatre, and we are focused on supporting the education and training largely of performers, composers, actors and theatre technicians. So it may not surprise you to know that most of our work is about live performance, and many of us are not terribly digitally savvy or literate. However, having said that, I'm talking from a point where in our institution we've been struggling with Moodle. We've had it a while. We've been struggling, and we're in a kind of transitional phase where we're really trying to up the ante and change how we use it. We want our use of Moodle to have a stronger impact on the teaching and learning in the school and to reach more students and staff. That's what we're aiming to do. So where have we been? Well, we got Moodle in 2006, and it was introduced by our head of IT, Richard Antonell, who is one of the great sort of champions of new technologies and learning in the school. And at that time, he was also undertaking an MA in IT at the Institute of Education, so I think that's where he started to learn about a lot of these ideas. And we initially had a level 1. In the second year, we moved to level 2, and that's essentially where we've been until this year. We've just now added Mahara and a higher level of Moodle. So the initial take-up was largely by 2 members of staff, both of whom were working in music studies. Music studies is often not really seen as a core part of the teaching and learning. It's a supporting study, if you like. And it was used with some considerable success, particularly for an oral class, where there were weekly worksheets, notes and resources to support the learning within the class situations. It's been meticulously used in that context and has proved reasonably successful. We also had one particular member of staff, Branda Ford, who wanted to use it with a tutorial group. Now, a tutorial group is a small group that meets weekly. It's about 6 to 8 students, and they are working on core musicianship, analysis, history, performance practices, and so on. She took it up and used it, and also did some research around it. In what she did, she was combining, again, using it really as a repository for resources from the tutorial sessions, so the handouts that she was producing. She was also using it to add additional web-based resources, and she tried to get the students to engage in a forum. Now, the little bit of research she did was only with 8 students, so we take this with extreme caution, but I think it does, what she found has actually given us some clues about the particular nature of our kind of students. Clearly, the students thought that there was some value in having this site, in having Moodle. and they thought that there was potential for this to improve their learning. They also felt that they had the relevant IT skills. Now that's interesting because actually it's our staff, I think, who struggle the most with the IT side of things. They very much valued having all those additional resources there that they could return to, and they could learn at their own pace. I think that's particularly important. We have quite a lot of students whose English is not their first language, and they may struggle particularly with things like written English as opposed to verbal interaction. We also have a lot of students who are going off to perform around the country or in other countries, so are not present in the school all the time. So it was clearly a valuable resource for them to be able to access this material. On the downsides, the things that were problematic was that they did feel more isolated with the use of Moodle than they did in face-to-face contact. And I guess for us that's maybe no surprise given the amount of face-to-face contact and in the intensity of that contact that goes on. There's a lot of one-to-one tuition, there's a lot of really continual interaction between academic staff and the students. So it's perhaps not surprising that they felt a bit more isolated and found interaction with a tutor relatively formal in that context. Critical one, they didn't feel that Moodle enhanced their collaboration with peers. And I think that's a big thing that we need to try and crack. That will be a great achievement if we can crack that one. And interestingly, they doubted whether future employers would value their skills in this area. Largely our students go on to work as performers, as instrumental teachers, and at that point, this was in 2008, a lot of them were not seeing their lives, their professional lives, requiring strong digital engagement. So that's just a screenshot of how our Moodle site looks now. I think you'll probably, I sort of wanted to put it up there just to kind of be completely upfront about how unexciting and basic I think it is. That's the reality as it is today. You can see there are a few more courses going on there, but fundamentally we haven't done much to develop what we're doing. This is going into one of our courses, which is Performance Matters. It's a course for first year music undergraduates. And I think this is very typical of the sorts of things that we currently have on Moodle. So again, it's notes from sessions, it's handouts, it's pointing people in the direction of some additional sources that they might find on the web. It's offering things like warm-ups, some specific exercises or directions for exercises that people might want to use. And here another classic thing, someone who's tried to set up a forum, no replies whatsoever, no engagement whatsoever with the forum. So I think what we're saying to ourselves is that we've actually had quite a lot of naive attempts at getting this going. There's been some enthusiasm from a few members of staff, but essentially we haven't really got off the ground with much of the potential. So we then have to ask ourselves, well, okay, why is that? And I think one answer can be Moodle is just not for an institution like ourselves that is so fundamentally face-to-face based in a vocational training in the performing arts. I disagree with that, but I think it's, the overriding culture in my institution would probably be this really doesn't have a lot to offer us or our students. What counts is the training they receive on a daily basis, weekly basis, with the academic staff in situ. And I think the Performance Matters full start, if you like, was a case in point. This was, we tried to involve, there were 12 staff who were going to be involved in this and over 100 students. It seemed like a great idea. Work with the students in their first year, get them used to the whole thing. 12 staff ought to be manageable, we can make this work, off we go. But it didn't work. And clearly, I think we were trying to make too large a cultural leap. We were trying to say, this group of staff will be involved in the development. We were trying to say, the students will use this. And most importantly, we just didn't have sufficient technical support. So actually what happened was that a lot of staff failed at the first attempt to get logged on and then through the course key, and having failed that first stage kind of just gave up and said, I can't do this. Or they just about got on and then started receiving a whole lot of emails and didn't know how to respond to them. So we didn't have sufficient support and ongoing training for those staff to help them to make it work. We had some initial training and that was it. Persuading people that it was going to be a useful part of the programme was also problematic. I think partly because of these technical issues, but also, you know, I think this morning's presentation so clearly articulated the complexity of the possibilities in terms of approaches to learning and how learning is changing and transforming in a social context. But actually, an awful lot of our teaching staff won't have engaged with those kind of theories of learning or that kind of understanding of learning. Their approach to learning is very much based in the craft of their discipline. So that was very hard. So certainly a number of people in our institution would be quite happy to say, let's just leave the whole thing, let's not bother with this. I don't agree with that, and certainly there are people who also don't agree. There's a clear rationale for us, both from the kind of outside, the implications of Brown and the changing funding mechanisms, but also from our own QAA most recent report and the search for efficiencies and so on. All suggest that, of course, it's something that's worth doing. I want to add to that, I actually think it's most important in terms of supporting a breadth of learning for our students. One of the biggest problems that we suffer from is an over-dependence, if you like, of our students on that staff-student contact, taking responsibility for their own learning, becoming entrepreneurial, becoming networked as learners is more difficult for them. And I feel very strongly that Moodle and the VLE offers some opportunities for us to enhance that part of students' development. So where we're at now is that we've extended our provision to Mahara, and we have identified a kind of two-pronged development phase for the use of Moodle. So the first thing that we're doing is we've identified a particular area of provision where we want to enhance what we're doing. And that's with a new doctoral program that we've just had validated. The reasons for choosing this are several. First of all, that it's a new program, so we can embed how we develop the VLE from the start. We can build it into the design of the whole learning environment for the students. It's not a bolt-on, it's an integral part. Secondly, that it's a cross-school program. It's our first ever cross-school program. Therefore, we can impact on students and staff across the school and build a community of those engaged with the VLE across the school rather than just in one place. Thirdly, that the number of students is relatively small to start with, so we hope that we can actually tailor the support given to them and ensure that we can make this work well, but also that we can gather a useful set of feedback as we go forward. Another reason for choosing this is that research is a growing area in our school, and we also have a series of workshops, conferences, symposia, and so on, that we also need to service in terms of creating a repository for materials from them, being able to publish some of these to the web, being able to promote some of those sessions. So we've got a whole growing area of activity that we can consider together. And the last reason for choosing that area is that it's an area of my own responsibility, so I can have some control over making sure that the process goes forward and doesn't stall. The second prong of what we're doing is to undertake a school-wide audit of current use and need and perceived potential of Moodle. And that's where we're working very closely with the Regional Centre for the JISC team, who've obviously done lots of this kind of audit before, and have suggested that it will provide a very useful set of background data to go alongside the developmental process that we're using. So that's going to take the form of a questionnaire that's currently being developed and will be running soon. We've, around each of these two strands of development, we've identified a working group that will be responsible for overseeing, steering the project, but also then looking at the results from it. With the doctoral programme, we've got as far as identifying what we want it to be able to do. So there are three big areas. One of them is, in a sense, as a repository for all the kind of documents that students may need to access. So that's very much replicating the kinds of things that we've already been doing. And it's not very interesting, but an important part of what we want to be able to do. The second part is much more to do with the social networking and message boarding for students. So trying to find a way to make it an area where they will want to go to find out about employment opportunities, to find out about conferences, performances, festivals that might be of interest, where they can post messages and opportunities and so on. And the third part is very much around the reflective journey of their study and being able to create a trail of that journey through personal development plans, log of supervision reports, and the individual e-portfolio. Of course, what comes with that is the potential for publishing some of that portfolio. So there's the whole thing of creating your presence in the wider world and addressing issues of employability in that way. We've also identified the function for our ResearchWorks series, so that includes promotion, access to materials, videocasts, podcasts, written summaries and so on. And we do very much want the potential to be able to choose how much of that is available internally and how much is available to the wider world. There's the timetable. You'll see we're kind of at the start of the process. Well, it always feels as though we're at the start, but actually we've been going with this for quite a long time. We've been working on this since, about October, I think. But that's where we are now. So we've put all the technical things in place. We've got Mahara and so on going. We're currently awaiting the redevelopment of the site so that we can start to play around with it and populate it, with aiming to launch in September 11. Similarly with the audit of use and need, that's due to complete in July, so that the findings can be then forwarded into our teaching and learning strategy review, which is due to be the update is due for completion in November. And I think that this is a really, really important part of the process now, is that rather than this just being a nice development in the school, it actually feeds through into that strategic level of thinking and the strategic documentation. Why do I say it's so important to get it into the strategic documentation? Because I think that is a key part of the cultural change. There's a degree to which I think what we're trying to do is to work bottom up. We're trying to create a pool of staff and students around this development, having key roles in deciding what we're going to do with Moodle, how we're going to use it. But then also, out of that work and out of a survey of everybody comes some strong recommendations for that strategic level. I think unless we can marry those two, the bottom up and the top down together, certainly in an institution like ours, we are not going to be able to make that cultural shift. So there are massive implications for internal communication. Once we start to have a clear set of recommendations strategically, there's going to be a lot of communication that needs to happen, that staff start to understand some of the potential and start to understand how they can build the skills, the practice, through to that creative appropriation that was being discussed early this morning. There are also implications for technical support. The next presentation, I think, is going to come from another conservatoire where they have a learning... What's your role again?
E-learning coordinator.
E-learning coordinator. We don't have such a thing. So there are huge implications for us about how we support this work as we continue into the future. And of course, there is that anxiety: will we actually make any progress? And on that note, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helena. That was a really honest presentation about the difficulties you face, which I'm sure will not come as a surprise to many people here. So can I open it up to questions? We've got a few minutes for questions.
Just ask what version of Moodle are you using?
I'm just going to repeat. Can you repeat the question? Sorry, just for
what version of Moodle we're using? That's a really good question, and I can't tell you the the straight answer to that. If I said we're using the lowest level where you can integrate Mahara, does that make any sense to you?
Yeah, probably 2.0 then.
I think it may be 3. There isn't a 3. Sorry?
If you log on as administrator and click on notifications or hover underneath the Moodle logo.
Well, can we do that here? Can we go online?
We have admin access to the application.
Yeah. If it's easy, we'll do it now. If not, we'll get Helena to email us.
Hosted by ULCC, it's probably 1.9.
Yes, that's what I was.
It's
That would
online.
be nice.
It is hosted by ULCC.
Yeah.
It's still 1.9.
Yeah. I know quite a few providers who are using Mahara with 1.9 at the moment, so I think thank you. That's our answer. Thank you very much. Another question.
Yeah. I'll look in a minute, yeah.
Would it be correct that the primary reason for the initial lack of success was the teachers rather than the students? Because my perception of
I think that's probably true.
students is that if they're happy, I mean, they're so happy with social networking stuff and asking to do stuff on the web, but I'm a teacher, but my interactions with the music teachers is rather different.
Yeah. I think that's probably right. I think at the beginning there were also some issues actually about people getting their login details, and I think some of the students also struggled with that. So, and there was an issue about not being able to access stuff when they weren't in the building. But so I think those were kind of barriers, because lots of them actually said, well, we would do forum stuff. You know, we would do this, but we've got to come in to do it, which doesn't seem to make sense.
Why do they have to do that?
But now that doesn't have to happen. I don't understand totally what it's to do. I think it's a funny thing because we're actually part of the City of London Corporation, and it was to do with firewalls and stuff like that.
Just with your audit of use and need, how will they know what they want if they don't know what it can do?
Well, they won't, but some staff are already using it. So there are some.
Bad experience kind of already. Isn't that going to just tarnish their view of it? Probably. But I think there's a kind of merit in getting all of that out in the open and actually seeing what's there, and then being in a position to challenge those perceptions rather than it being a kind of, you know, somehow in a back pocket and people aren't allowed to express what they're thinking. I work at a music college and we use Moodle extensively for all our courses in over 8 centres, primarily performance-based, technology-based there. And it has been engaged with in those centres in a number of different ways. Where it's been successful is where the actual interface has been made easy between the student and the actual Moodle itself. Where it's been least successful is where the least work has been put in the back end of it and making it accessible. So if you make it accessible, tutors buy into it. I mean, our tutors are all our instrumental tutors, put their lessons online. So this is a lesson. You can go watch an embedded video in Moodle, watch a graded performance in Moodle, and then it gives them a reason to want to go there. If it's not engaged with fully, we're not doing that.
Yeah. And what would you say have been the kind of key things that have made that accessibility?
That's made it, well, actually, it's just simple designs, really, I think, rather than cluttered pages and courses, personalised courses, so individuals can go to a course that's purely catered around their sort of units of study and what they're doing.
So they find their own, they go to a single page and it just comes up with all the courses that they're on.
And everything is linked from there with it, and instead of just using the typical Moodle links, which are very small, we use images instead, so they click on images rather than small links. Things like that, simple things that actually make it more accessible.
Well, that's the kind of thing that we weren't able to do before. We weren't able to kind of use images in that way. So.
Okay, well, thanks ever such a lot for sharing that. Maybe we can find out a bit more data about how you've got, especially around the
show you the page and show you
that'd be great, and staff development issue as well. Okay, we've got a few questions. I've noted one here, one there, and one there, and one there. So can I take your question first?
Yeah, you just mentioned that the students felt frustrated that they couldn't be collaborative working with Moodle. I'm just wondering if your Mahara pilot has addressed that, being addressed through Mahara.
Well, we haven't started using Mahara yet, but that's, yes, that's absolutely.
I find that it will be, and also because of the multimedia function and being able to upload video, pictures, etc. into Mahara and comment on each other's work, and that might actually help as well. Some of the issue of having to see a tutor from that face-to-face contact and help with their autonomy.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, something I was actually sent to get a timetable for how to roll it out, so you've done my work for the week. Were your research teams the same teams for both? So did the audit people look after the first stage as well? I think at our school we're worried about putting too much on people. So did someone look after the audit and then a different team look after the...
Yeah, they're separate teams, although there are one or two people who are on both. Yeah.
Real, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Do you have, I mean, you describe this as a cultural change.
Yeah.
Who owns cultural change in your project? Does anyone actually own it?
What do you
in my
mean?
experience, that's often the reason that change doesn't come through, isn't sustainable, but actually it's an objective, but nobody owns it.
Yes.
So nobody does it.
Well, I think what I'm saying is, I think my feeling about this is that it will only be sustainable if it's bottom up and from the strategic level. So the cultural change, the move towards that cultural change becomes something that's important for the students, that they start to get on board with it, that staff, teaching staff increasingly get on board with it, but also the senior management understand.
Right.
Yeah, because unless you have it in all those directions, I think it's going to be very difficult.
I agree. I wasn't being facetious in any sense at all. I mean, it's the area where often the responsibility is forgotten.
Yes.
And if they have responsibility for, using my terminology, making money out of spending this money and putting this project in, they'll make sure somebody has responsibility for getting that return. But they often don't. So it's worth looking into.
That's super.
Thank you.
We might come back to that issue at the end if we're time after Peter's done the presentation, because I suspect that's very relevant for both organisations this morning. The gentleman here.
Thank you. I wanted to make a point, but also to respond to something that you've said. And the first point is that this is about change, and most of that change is not actually about technology.
No.
I think one of the things we're tempted in teaching always to look for a quick return, that we're looking for a quick indication that we've worked, and actually the students will talk to you about 10 years' time about something you said in the classroom.
Yeah.
And I think we're in the same position now, whether it's Moodle or any other VLE, we are starting a process of change which is going to last the next 100 years.
Yeah.
The things that we do now, some of it we won't see the benefit for 5 years or 10 years, because we're changing people and attitudes and processes. And the second point I think that is actually critically important, and I come from a vocational institution which is hospitality focused, so many of our teachers come from industry. Now I came through English education and support systems. I now work in Switzerland. I had INSET training, I did a PGCE, I did a Masters in Education. But most of the people I'm introducing to Moodle do not have an educational language to talk about their practice.
Yeah.
And if you put what they're doing under scrutiny, then actually some of it doesn't stand up to examination.
Yeah.
So we're in a very sensitive place, because for us to advise people effectively on how to use Moodle, they have to reveal themselves naked in all their teaching glory, and many of them are actually quite insecure about that. So I think you're back to this change management process. So I think that was, for me, that was one of the most important things, to identify that we have the same issue.
Yeah.
How do we find a language that can start to take us towards the research-based language that we're hearing this morning?
Yeah. Yes, because if I was to take that language into my institution, it would be just get a complete, And
I can imagine, as I've worked with work-based learning providers, that the language that is all important, isn't it? Absolutely. Well, look, I think we're going to have to stop the questions there. I'm sorry, because I think there was another question over here somewhere. I hope we'll have time to raise it at the end.
Yeah, thank you.
So thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.